All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome in. So there's been a lot of talk, a lot of ideas thrown out by Jets fans about potentially going through the front office construction a little bit differently in this upcoming cycle, right? When we're starting to look for new general managers and whatnot, maybe the Jets can go about it differently by hiring a team president who oversees football operations. We've seen this over and over and over across multiple teams in football. It's not rare. It's not this, out of left field occurrence. No, it happens pretty much all the time. Now, when you're talking about again, a president who oversees football ops, it's a completely different role than some of the bigger titles in a front office. There's pros. There's also cons. So we can take a look at a couple different structures because there's no set way to do it. And there's different ideas or organizational structures that are completely different from one another, but yet at the same time, they all have, an overseer of football operations. So I guess the first way, I would assume the traditional way that what Jets fans are suggesting is similar to like what the Tennessee Titans have right now, where you have Chad Brinker. He is the president of football operations. That's his sole duty within the Titans org, right? Beside him, you have Cartham, who is the Titans general manager. So there's this split direction within the front office. You have your general manager, you have your overseer of football operations. Now, if the Jets have something similar, right, where you bring in maybe someone who's been around the game for a long, long time, and he holds that position of power, of direction, right? In other words, he's going to be he's going to hire his GM. He's going to have a massive input in the next head coach. I assume if that person is going to be hiring a general manager, the decision to hire that next head coach would not be abrasive. I don't think it would be rough. I think there would be a ton of cohesion within the head coaching search. And why do I say that? Because the president of football operations, the manager, if you will, is going to be handpicking his general manager. You would assume the general manager that he picks out, the general manager that gets the Jets job, is not going to have different core values than the president of football ops. The two parties would have shared ideas, a collective mindset on how to build the roster. So therefore, the head coaching search would be a lot easier. In other words, the president of football operations would not, he would come to the table and say, for example, I want to build this team through athleticism. I want there to be a big focus on numbers, raw ability, physical talent, similar to like Seattle. So I'm going to hire a general manager that doesn't value that at all. I mean, think about how chaotic the head coaching search would be. It just makes no sense. Absolutely no sense. So I think a structure like that could make a lot of sense for the Jets. It just all depends on who is the right candidate to be the president of football operations. We can look at another organizational structure, which is we could say, let's take a look at the Panthers, right? The Panthers recently hired this past cycle Dan Morgan. Now, Dan Morgan, former player, I remember him back with the Buffalo Bills. He took over as general manager and president of football operations. So you have one person with a ton of power within the organization, and now he's making tons of decisions, obviously about free agency, about team vision, about the path that the team is going to be traveling down, about the draft, about the head coach. And of course, we did see Dave Canales get the head coaching job, but is that maybe a direction that you would like to travel down, where you have one guy with enormous power, where you're holding two positions? So on one hand, it makes the job a lot more attractive, right, for potential candidates. I mean, think about it. If you are, someone out there that could be interviewing for a gig, and you have the Jets saying, hey, not only do we want you as general manager, but we also want you to be the president of football operations. And this is going to be your show. This is going to be your team. That's pretty attractive, right? And obviously, you would assume more money comes with that role. despite these guys already getting paid millions of dollars anyway. But again, Morgan started in Seattle, and then he eventually worked his way up and got the director of player personnel job with the Buffalo Bills, and then took over this past season. And by the way, Carolina is kind of known for flipping through, cycling through guys. They had Scott Fitterer for, I think, only just a couple of years. And then, of course, again, this past season, they promoted Dan Morgan. So that's another organizational structure that we can look at. The third organization that I feel like is relevant to bring up here is the Lions, right? Now, the Lions, I mean, you look at the front office, it is just loaded. It's loaded with ex-players. It's loaded with guys with a lot of experience. I mean, just rattle off some of the names in this, within this team. Rod Wood oversees football operations. Then you have Brad Holmes, who's the general manager. You have Ray Agnew, assistant general manager, right? He's kind of one of the more hotter candidates, if you will, to get a GM job. You have John Dorsey, who is a senior personnel executive. You also have Chris Spielman, right, ex-player, who is the assistant to the team president / CEO. I mean, notice we didn't talk about any of the former players that is on the Lions coaching staff. Dan Campbell, Aaron Glenn. When they made that switch initially, they overhauled it, right? So could we see a situation like that? I'm going to say I doubt it. I think the other two situations are maybe more ideal for the Jets when it comes to the current ownership structure. I don't necessarily think if Woody's the owner of the team, he's not going to sell the team, and he's potentially could leave for 4 years and let Chris Johnson kind of take over as like interim owner. I don't think Woody Johnson wants to bring in a ton of different people, being shot callers, right? Having a say with what happens, and he is across the pond. I think he's probably just going to want one connection, right? One guy that he can talk to. I mean, we hear Joe Douglas talk about it all the time. I talk to Woody Johnson every day, right? I think Woody Johnson and Chris Johnson, it would be easier for them because we know the Jets ownership, the Jets aren't considered a well-ran team. In other words, we're not the Steelers, we're not the Eagles, we're not the Lions, we're not the Bills. So I think from Woody and Chris's perspective, it might just be easier for them to hand over the reins to one person, maybe two people, and they can just go about it. I'm not saying that's the correct way. It may be, it may not be, but I think that's just the most likely for the Jets. So anyway, let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section on this. Do you want the Jets to hire someone as a president of football operations who oversees and sets the tone to then find the GM, to then find the head coach? Or should we just go about it, the typical way, which is just ownership has a heavy hand in who we hire in general manager, and then we kind of go from there. So anyway, thanks so much for watching. I appreciate you guys, and as always, go Jets.